So, welcome to AI Everywhere, a keynote series of human-generated talks. Not 100%, because I asked ChatGPT to proofread my text in English. You do also, okay. So if things go wrong somehow, the same will be on me. If things go good, very good, now that you know I asked it to proofread my text, you don't know how much of it is like real me or fake me. And that's part of the problem. Okay, I am Kiki, a data journalist and project manager with iMEdD, and I am happy to introduce this session at the Media and Democracy Summit. Today, we live in an era where artificial intelligence is revolutionizing nearly every aspect of our lives. I remember moderating a panel discussion on AI just a few years ago, provocatively beginning the conversation by asking whether AI truly exists or if it's merely a buzzword. Nowadays, with platforms and chatbots making AI accessible to everyone for any reason, I wouldn't ask the same question. Instead, I could probably ask who already feels overwhelmed. Of course, celebrating but also pondering the intersection of AI and humanity is normal, expected, and necessary. We have questions, but we don't have all the answers, at least not yet. We do know for sure that AI is a powerful tool, reshaping how we gather, analyze, and disseminate information. As journalists, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where AI is not just a tool, but a transformative source that can potentially shape the future of reporting and storytelling. Generative AI can create texts, images, visuals. For us in journalism, this means unlocking new avenues for storytelling and audience engagement. AI can assist in writing reports, making complex information more accessible, and producing real-time updates, for example, during major events. As often said, AI's ability to generate content can significantly reduce the time journalists spend on routine tasks such as drafting or updating basic reports or transcribing interviews. AI can also be a useful editorial assistant. You can forget your editor for a while, for example. When you have AI generating headlines or providing feedback on gender balance of testimonials in a story, for example. Large language models, accessible for use through online platforms, are making what used to be specialized work in data science available to everyone. One could say that AI can take care of the mundane or the previously unfeasible, freeing us to pursue what we consider truly profound. Or probably not. I'm questioning this to underline that, with great power comes great responsibility. While AI offers incredible potential, it also poses significant ethical and practical challenges. The power to generate content at scale raises crucial questions about authenticity, accuracy, and bias. The rise of deepfakes and AI-generated misinformation presents serious challenges to public trust and democratic discourse. How do we ensure that the content produced by AI is truthful and free from biases present in the training data? How do we deal with the fact that we usually do not know, what the training data consists of or how it is treated. How do we handle the black box problem of algorithms and AI chatbots? Additionally, considering all these challenges, if humans need to continuously edit, fact-check, or correct AI-generated outputs before use, are these interactions truly time-saving, or can they be time-consuming as well? However, it's not only AI failures that we need to consider. We should also reflect on our great expectations. You know, when platforms make AI a popular tool in everyone's hands, that is the most rebelling thing, in my opinion, they create high expectations. When these high expectations are not met, disappointment can lead to distrust. And distrust can lead to constant efforts to correct or prove or improve AI-generated outputs, ending up sometimes having AI in the loop instead of having human in the loop. So we're here today to discuss and go beyond those opportunities, threats, questions, and future possibilities. We have 5 distinguished speakers who will address their keynotes on various aspects of the chances and the challenges ahead. I invite you to listen, to question, and engage with our speakers during the Q&A session, which will follow. Without further delay, I would like to welcome our first speaker to the stage. A senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, he helps decision makers around the world understand and address the impact of emerging technologies. I'm talking about Mike Nelson, with more than 3 decades of experience in the field. He already introduced himself as a futurist. He's now presenting 4 scenarios for the future of technology and the media. Mike, welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much for being here still. How many of you here were here yesterday for the panel I was in? Okay, so you already know sort of who I am and how I'm a futurist, and I now know I can't use the same jokes. I want to thank our moderator for doing a very concise introduction, because I have a 40-year resume and it can get pretty long. I'm going to do something very unusual. I'm a technologist, but I don't like using technology on stage because it never quite works for me. But I've invented something called virtual PowerPoint. So imagine that this is my piece of chalk, and I'm going to draw things in the air to illustrate 4 scenarios for the future of the internet. I mentioned yesterday I've had 8 dream jobs. My 5th dream job was teaching at Georgetown and doing some consulting for the CSC Leading Edge Forum, which is one of the top, most visionary consulting groups talking about not only how technology will evolve, but how it will be used by corporations. And in that, I learned really how to do scenario planning and how to develop really concise, effective ways to think about the different ways the world could evolve. The course I taught was called, one of the courses I taught, by far the most popular course I taught, and the most fun class I taught was called How to Predict the Futures, parentheses S. My goal was not to tell people what was coming, and today my goal is not to tell you what's coming. It's to tell you 3 or 4 things that could be coming and how you can get ready for it. The Bible that I used for my class was from Peter Schwartz, one of the most successful futurists, scenario planners of all time. He personally made Shell Oil $40 billion by helping them prepare for the future. So listen to me. maybe you'll help somebody make $1 billion. The first thing you learn from Peter's book, which is entitled The Art of the Long View, it's more than 35 years old, but it's still the best manual on how to do scenarios. The first thing you do is you sit down and you think about all the different forces and factors that could shape our future. And I'm focusing today on the question of technology-enabled media. What's coming because of new ways of sorting through information, new ways of generating information, new ways of building community online. So if you start making a list, it's a pretty long one. Obviously, we're going to be affected by cheaper technology. We're going to be affected by artificial intelligence. We're going to be affected by changing nature of demand. We've already seen people talking about the post-literate society and the rise of TikTok as an incredibly effective way of delivering news, not necessarily comprehensive, unbiased news, but it's providing news to tens of millions of Americans, at least for now. So when you make this long list, you then highlight the two that are fundamental, the two things that will most affect what the future is. And then you make a 2x2 matrix that allows you to look at the different ways that these two factors could influence the world. My argument today is that the two things we need to focus on, by far the most important factors that will define our future, are the amount of trust that consumers have in the media that they are consuming. And the other one is the amount of sharing of data, content, and information about the people who are providing the content. So if you draw if I take my virtual PowerPoint, I'm going to draw a vertical axis up and down. Up is trust, people believing in the media more than they do today, and the other direction, people believing less. On the other axis, we have more sharing and less sharing. So we have divided the world of the future into 4 scenarios. If you know anything about McKinsey and Gartner, you know that the golden quadrant, the one that provides the most benefit to the most people, is usually the top right. Now, I'm making a values judgment. I think more sharing is better. I'm an engineer, a physicist. I like data. There's a lot of MBAs who actually think that the less sharing side is more profitable because you can hoard your data, you can build a wall around your data, you can charge monopoly rents for your data. And that's one of the problems with these scenarios. There's a lot of reasons that people are pushing one way or the other. There's no consensus on what the best is. I think most of us want to be in the upper half. We want consumers to trust more. But surprisingly, there are business models that benefit more by being in the bottom half of this 4-part space. So let me quickly describe what I think could happen in each of these scenarios, and then talk about the most important part of my presentation, the barriers that are preventing us from getting to the golden quadrant, where information flows freely and people can figure out what to trust. Let me start by describing what I think is a good goal. In some ways, it's the Wikipedia model. It's a world where millions of people have contributed insights, and probably tens of millions of people have corrected, refined those insights, sometimes fixing a typo, other times providing more footnotes, building trust in that content. Most people don't understand that Wikipedia is already using artificial intelligence and some very sophisticated technology, because there are a lot of trolls out there who are trying to alter Wikipedia. And that's one of the reasons it's going to be hard to get above the line. We have nation states, we have PR agencies, we have just strange teenagers who think it's fun to deface websites. They're pushing us down. So we need the technology that artificial intelligence provides. We also need something else really important. We need provenance. We need technologies built into the system that allow us to know where a particular sentence or diagram or data set came from and whether it's been altered. Microsoft's done some great work on technologies for provenance. It's a bit like what they do with art pieces, right? When you buy a painting, you want to know that it's not stolen. You want to know that it's really the real Van Gogh. You want to see a record that goes all the way back to, ideally, the artist's studio. We need that for content. We need to know who's actually pumping that information out. Am I reading this because of some Russian troll thought I needed to see it? Me and 2 million other people? And that's another place where artificial intelligence can help us know whether somebody is distorting our information environment. Twitter has invested a little bit of money on this, Facebook a lot more, but we still haven't fixed the problem. And then the other issue is this identity question. We need a way to know who created this, if they're willing to reveal that. I mean, we want anonymity online, but for much of the media, you want to know the real source. You want to know the reputation of that person. You not only want to know their name and perhaps who they work for, but you'd like to know some of their other attributes. You want to see their LinkedIn profile. You want to know what training they have, what other publications they have, so you can know whether to trust. So that's what we need to get up to this world. But the other really important thing is we need sharing. We need the ability to take all this content without paywalls and combine it into the distilled wisdom that you're really looking for. How many people remember Nicholas Negroponte's famous articles about the daily me? This was something from the 1980s, and it was in the early days of online publications, even before the web had been commercialized. The idea was you would get your customized newspaper, ordered in the sense of what you care about, not what the editor cares about or the editor thinks you care about. But to get that kind of customized content, somehow we have to be able to tap hundreds of different sources every day. And today, the MBAs are in charge in more and more places, and they're putting up the firewalls and the paywalls, and they're making it harder for me to get the customized content I want. And so that's the difference between the right side of my scenario chart and the left side. In the left side, I might trust the content because I can go to the New York Times website and see that, yes, indeed, it's the New York Times. But I have to do a lot more work. I have to waste a lot of time logging in. I have to spend a lot of money to get all these different sources. So that's, again, two good scenarios that work for a lot of people. I would argue that more sharing gets me a more useful, customized content. And I'd also argue that if I have 5 sources that AI can check and validate and compare, I will be more likely to trust it than if I only have enough money to buy one source of content behind paywalls. If you haven't already seen it, I urge you to get a copy of The Atlantic or pay for a subscription. This is Anne Applebaum's new article called The New Propaganda. This is what's worrying me most, and my friends at Carnegie include several researchers working on the Partnership for Countering Influence Operations, PCIO. They've built a network of the best people around the world trying to stop the pollution of our brains by Russian trolls, Chinese trolls, Iranian bloggers, pumping disinformation into our brains. They're not looking to filter out the world of bad information. They're not delusional enough to believe that there's any technology that can do that. Their focus is getting our brains more protected so that we actually can spot the difference, and so that we have tools that we can use to see where information came from, who's reposting this, and why is it in my feed. One of the colleagues just did a great report on countering disinformation effectively. This is an ironical title. It's by John Bateman and Dean Jackson. It's ironical because the answer, when you actually look at the data, is that there are 11 ways to counter disinformation, and not one of them is really effective or economical. Some combination can get us a long way, but we have a lot more work to do. And a lot of it depends on these questions of identity and provenance. We need new technologies. And as a technologist, I want to help us not only develop those technologies, but make them cost effective. The other thing that I think we can look forward to in the future is not artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. Rather than having AI doing the thinking for us, if we design these tools well, they're augmenting our intelligence, and more importantly, they're augmenting the intelligence of our network of collaborators, and that network can be not just a few dozen people, but literally millions of people, like it is with Wikipedia. And that's where we have to be thinking. We have to be thinking of an open global mind of interconnected people and interconnected tools, providing the augmented intelligence needed to find the good stuff, to push us above the untrusted, trusted line. And the only way I believe we really get to where we need to get is if we have this open sharing. So that's my bottom line. The question, though, is what's keeping us from the right side of this diagram? Why isn't there more sharing? Well, first of all, I've blamed the MBAs already. Buckminster Fuller, one of the most famous visionaries of all time, was famous for saying, engineers see scarcity and innovate to create abundance. MBAs and politicians see scarcity and turn it into monopoly and profit. I'm with the engineers. One of the ways the people who want silos and monopolies do what they do is by overusing and abusing copyright. And if you look at when copyright was started in 1710 with the Statute of Anne, it was a very different thing. Today it's being used to really restrict the competition and dramatically restrict collaboration, preventing people from building on the good content that's out there already, whether it's music, imagery, content, books. But the other thing that's become very clear is that there's a new excuse for keeping data locked up in silos, and that is national security. We just saw that with TikTok. The American people, tens of millions of American people were using TikTok every day. They want the flow of information. The US Senate and the US House of Representatives decided that there was an existential threat posed by TikTok videos, and they're closing down the sharing of information. It's not just the US. In India, they had a border skirmish in the high Himalaya. They have a buffer zone where you can't have guns or artillery, so the Indian soldiers started dying because the Chinese soldiers were throwing rocks at them and starting landslides. A few dozen people died, unfortunately, The Indian government closed down 200 Chinese apps. And again, this national security is restricting this sharing of information. It's even more clear in the area of artificial intelligence, which could lead to better collaboration and sharing, and better, more trusted sources of information. We actually have members of Congress fighting against open source software for AI. Open source software, sharing of the software, is the way we've developed the entire web, whether it was the original web, much of the content. The network itself is based on open source software. But you have members of Congress saying, "Oh, you wouldn't open source the Manhattan Project, would you?" Comparing AI to nuclear technology. That's not a stupid analogy. That is a self-destructive, self-defeating analogy. We need to stop this using national security as an excuse to stop sharing. But it's there, and technologists like me, innovators, not just in the AI field, but in Wikipedia, in the media, we all have to kind of reorient and get away from this idea that data is like oil. Data is the new oil. It was on the cover of The Economist 5 years ago, so it must be true. No, it's insane. We don't burn our data and then be done with it. Data is the new water. You use it once, you use it again, you use it again. You mix it, you make it better. Unfortunately, with water, we also have a whole bunch of it in the deep ocean and locked up in the Antarctic ice sheets where we can't use it very well. But that's how we need to think about it. Water is something that flows across borders. And that's where we can, with these new analogies, we will get to a better world where we have more trusted information and more sharing. I hope we have time to go a little deeper into this. I do intend to write this up at some point, so I would welcome your comments and criticisms. The best way to do that is to use Twitter. I was one of the very first people on there. My Twitter handle is @Mike Nelson. I was the first Mike Nelson, and I'm very proud of that. But you can post there, you can send me direct messages, and again, I hope I've stimulated some thought and maybe said one or two things that are controversial and useful.
Thank you for your talk, and thank you for finishing kind of on time. So earlier we referred to accessibility and the potential of bringing AI to everyone's hands. The question is, does this truly apply to everyone? And how can we create the conditions for AI to be a problem solver rather than an obstacle for small newsrooms around the world? Paula Valacco, the community manager of JournalismAI, an initiative of the journalism think tank Polis at the London School of Economics, proudly emphasizes this point and is passionate about ensuring that small newsrooms are not left behind. Let's hear from her. Paula, welcome to the stage.
Hello. Well, let's see if this works, because I'm the first one using a clicker. I mean, 3 days, but still. Can I try? Yeah, definitely a huge win. Right. Okay, so we've talked and we discussed a lot about all the problems that right now media is facing around the world. I mean, it's not like the best time to be a journalist in many senses. I mean, audiences, they avoid us, like actively avoiding us. The news business, oof, we don't get money. I mean, very complicated indeed. What else? Well, and then what happens? AI comes and basically it can replace us. That's absolutely terrifying, right? And especially taking into account the important role that these kind of newsrooms, the small newsrooms, those that perhaps they don't get, the millions of page views or whatever, but they are doing a very, very relevant part in representing these democracies that are increasingly complex, increasingly diverse, but at the same time, they get polarized. They seem to be more homogeneous at how they are covered. So when we started at Journalism AI 5 years ago, we did some research trying to understand what was going on with AI in newsrooms and thinking how powerful this tool could be to empower them, to allow them to do more, better, and for more people. So basically, like 5 years ago, we had like this very, very like clear message. And this is a quote from Charlie. He's our director and founding director of Police and Journalism AI, saying that yes, if we value journalism as a social good, as something that we all need for the public interest, then journalism needed like to update and do it fast, because this wave, this third wave, we had the internet, we have social media, now it's AI. And when I talk with journalists, a lot of them, they just say it's not a wave, it's a tsunami. I mean, like, basically, I don't know what to do. Well, if they don't get ready, then it would be very difficult for us and for our societies. So we started working on that. And for example, something we did was establishing a fellowship that was the collab, in which we invited newsrooms from all over the world to take part, to start like iterating, innovating, experimenting, and having like a safe space, a safe environment to test new things and see what worked and what didn't. And then we realized that collaboration was key. Yes. Also, we needed to give resources. And in our situation, the resources that we can provide and that we have tried to also empower, besides giving the opportunity for all these news organizations to connect, is also to learn. We established an academy that basically works specifically with the small newsrooms, saying because, thinking that these technologies are really powerful and could really, really enhance their productivity. And with newsrooms that we know, they struggle a lot to get resources. They don't have time. They don't have very huge teams or whatever. So basically, assisting them into how to surf this wave and use AI responsibly in an ethical manner. And then we started, of course, trying to democratize this knowledge to all. What we have seen is that when you go and when you support these newsrooms, some incredible things can happen. And I'm just going to bring some examples from the Global South, because if you were here yesterday, you know already that yes, I'm from the Global South. That's how they call us, and we really face a lot of challenges. So basically, anything that these news organizations can do to get better or to improve their work is crucial. The first example is Chequeado. Chequeado, it's a very dear case to me because I was part of this process. I was part of the organization back in 2016 when we started working on deciding what parts of the fact-checking process we could automate and to make it better for our fact-checkers at the newsrooms and our news editors to work in a better way, in a more efficient way. And we decided that, for example, something that we could do was relying on the artificial intelligence at that time to go and screen and read all the news that we, as humans, it was very hard to do or very time consuming, and say, okay, let's train this AI and let make this AI help us to identify those fact-checkable statements that we then will use as our main input to do our work. This was incredibly important for our newsroom, and we started using it for live fact checkings. We use it for live transcriptions, and then incorporating previous fact checks into the process, so we didn't have to fact check the same statement twice or 3 times. It's something that could happen in a newsroom and always have to run behind the news. And what happens with Chequeado is a very interesting case, because it's a newsroom in the global south. I mean, our work was the first done in Spanish at that time, that would also collaborate with organizations, for example, in the US, in the UK, and South Africa. Africa Czech kind of works on different countries in Africa. And basically, how these technologies, once we adopted them and we make these adaptations, then they could easily be used by other organizations. Today, for example, like a lot of fact checkers in Latin America are also using this technology. But how was this created? It was created also because Chequeado had the support from external actors that also believed that Chequeado could do this, and then they could allocate specific resources to this. And this is a privilege that not many newsrooms have. However, there are other news organizations that are now getting resources and are now doing great stuff. For example, Cuestión Pública. Cuestión Pública is an investigative newsroom in Colombia. And investigative journalism is very complicated, especially imagine Colombia. I mean, you are dealing with a lot of different actors, and sometimes you don't have people that want to do that kind of job. Sometimes, and I mean, these stories take a lot of time, and a small resort, and I mean, these small newsrooms, they don't have some time. They the ability to say, okay, yes, don't worry, work 3 weeks, 2 months in this story. I will do the rest, because basically, when you work at a small newsroom of this kind, we all do everything. So basically, what happens with this project, Odin is a project that, 1 year ago when we talked with Claudia, the leader of Cuestión Pública, she told us that yes, she was thinking about how they could implement AI, but at the same time, again, resources were scarce, time was difficult to manage and everything. They were part of the challenge, the AI in Journalism Challenge with OSF, the Open Society Foundations, in which we participated also delivering our adaptation of the Academy. And now they have Odin, and it's a tool that allows these reporters to sort, into their vast amount of information that they have gathered, along the years in their investigative work, and include it and incorporate easily into their stories. So basically, it's a great way to make their work more relevant and more efficient. Then we have, for example, Rappler. Yesterday, we discussed a lot about what Maria Reza and her team are doing back in the Philippines. There, where our democracy is not present, and they have been struggling to show and to defend the truth in the middle of a lot of misinformation and disinformation campaigns, attacking them and everything. They were also part of the Open Society Academy last year, and there they built a tool to provide summaries and everything. I think that also this, for example, this initiative, the communities that they have created, they allow us to have great conversations with their audiences and making sure that, for example, hate speech or fake news don't get distributed between their communities. How to develop these safe spaces to have deep, quality conversations with your audiences is also key when you are trying to do so much for the democracy you live in. And then, for example, we have Daily Maverick. Daily Maverick is a newsroom based in South Africa. And what they have worked on is to create these special features how their newsrooms, the news they write, the articles, They get special summaries. They are edited always by editors of the team. And this has increased a lot the readership and the potential they have to retain their audience and help them travel across their content and also engage in more different ways with what they are producing. So basically this is an example of an initiative that we have done for a couple of years. Now, for example, this year, we did the first edition of the Academy in Spanish. Last year, for example, we also focused on that our African cohort, our European and Asian cohorts were comprised with more journalists from the most underdeveloped or the least developed countries, so we can provide better opportunities for them. And now we are launching it in Arabic. We are partnering with Arish, that is the reporters of investigative journalism in Arab, to also deliver this kind of information, this kind of resources that are really, really difficult to get in other languages than English. And that's a huge problem. And we discussed yesterday how important it is that these technologies are all basically produced in English, and they represent the culture. They are kind of conservative, of course, but how these different nuances in our cultures are not represented in a lot of these developments unless they build it themselves. And again, it's very expensive. So basically, we have talked a lot about our problems. And my take on AI, this is something we can discuss because I'm really open to that, is that basically the most relevant problems that the news industry have, they are not particularly related to the AI, exclusively related to the AI, but they can be either solved or accelerated with AI, by AI. And we have a role in ensuring that we can solve them in some way. Do I have an answer? No, but still, I think that, for example, supporting these organizations is key, is super important. And I love it that we are here and we are saying, yes, news matter, good journalism matter, and we have to help them go in that way. So wait, that's it for now. I'm going to join my partners here in the panel later, but basically the idea is to let you know that yes, a lot of things are being done, perhaps not as many as we'd like or as we need, but if we keep on working or walking this path, then there are some really, really important reasons to be hopeful about the future of news. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, very much. So if talking about AI today is synonymous with discussing challenges, then many of these challenges stem from the notion that AI, especially generative AI, is uncontrollable and ever-evolving. This sounds similar to the earlier days of the internet and the web, which is no longer a free land. When self-regulation seems unfeasible, regulation might be considered unavoidable. But how do humans regulate such a seemingly unreachable matter? Louise Riondel, co-secretary to the Council of Europe's Committee on Artificial Intelligence, will explain why regulation is needed. She will lay out the current regulatory landscape in Europe and beyond, including the Council of Europe's Framework Convention on AI and Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law. And she will discuss the main challenges of regulating AI. Unfortunately, Louise could not join us here in Wilmington as initially planned, but with the help of, guess what, technology, she will participate remotely. So let's try this. Louise, I will ask you the most asked question in recent years. Can you hear us? but we cannot. So let's do it again. Unmute Louise. And Louise, can you hear us? But we cannot. So that's our life. No lessons learned after 2020.
What about now?
Okay. The floor is yours. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks, Kelly. Finally, technology has not failed us. I'm really sorry I couldn't be here in person today with you. And we've talked about benefits and risks and how they play a role in distrust in AI. And I think indeed it is due to the fact that the expectations regarding the benefits were maybe too high, and that the magnitude of the risks, well, it has sometimes been overinflated to unrealistic doomsday scenario. And so in order to gain back this trust, which is fundamental, it's really important not only to demystify AI, which is to say what it technically can or cannot do, and the media plays a crucial role in this, but there's also a need for effective regulation, and that is what it responsibly should or shouldn't do. Now, I know that the word regulation sometimes has unhappy connotations of restriction and stifling, but in reality, it's simply a set of agreed upon rules to ensure the good functioning of something. And so let me draw a parallel here, which may particularly speak to you in the audience today. So many of you are professors or journalists or soon to be journalists. And in Western democracy, the media plays a pivotal role, which we've heard about today, and which has repeatedly been confirmed by the European Court of Human Rights, which is that it's the purveyor of information, it creates fora for public debate, and it acts as a public watchdog. And so as such, and to a certain degree, you have power over individuals in the formation of their thought, in the shaping of their beliefs, and over which information they have or don't have access to. And as Kelly said earlier, with power comes responsibility, but also duties. And in your profession, one might be tempted to take shortcuts to be the first one to break a story, for example. So some of your colleagues may publish an illegally obtained photo or run a one-sided interview or intentionally write a biased piece, leaving out crucial information. And others, such as yourselves, I assume, follow strict rules to ensure that your work is balanced, fair, and that it generally adheres to the highest level of ethical standards through, for example, fact-checking, source protection, and the cross-checking of information. And so the aim of regulation is to ensure a level playing field for all actors with minimum standards that all must abide by to mitigate the risk of harm. And so in the last few years, as the use of AI in our everyday lives has exploded, so did seemingly the proliferation of regulation of this technology. So what does it look like now? At EU level, the EU AI Act was adopted last week. And so it establishes a common regulatory and legal framework for AI in the European Union. And it basically says that AI system must be analyzed and then classified according to the risk they pose to users. And then according to that level of risks, there will be more or less regulation up to a total ban. And so that applies to the 27 member states of the EU, but also like the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, which you know about, the GDPR. The Act can also apply extraterritorially to providers from outside the EU if they have users within the EU. Then at international level, you have the OECD recommendation on artificial intelligence and the UNESCO recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence. But guess what? Those two are legally non-binding. And so that brings me to the Council of Europe Framework Convention on AI and Human Rights, Democracy, and the Rule of Law. So what sets the Council of Europe apart from those two institutions that I mentioned is that its role is to protect and promote human rights, but also democracy and the rule of law. And the organization has always been at the forefront of regulation of technology in order to protect these three guiding values. So for example, as early as 1981, we adopted the Convention for the Protection of Individuals with regards to automatic processing of personal data, which is known as Convention 108, 1981. And then in 2001, we adopted the Cybercrime Convention. Now, in 2019, we started working on AI. And what we did is we brought together within the Committee on AI, which is known as the CAI, like-minded democratic states wanting to make a pledge to use AI responsibly and opposing its misuse. And those states are the 46 member state of the Council of Europe, but also its observer states, which are Canada, Japan, Mexico, the Holy See, and of course the United States of America, as well as the European Union and a significant number of non-member states, which are Australia, Argentina, Costa Rica, Israel, Peru, and Uruguay. So truly global. And their task was to draft the first international legally binding treaty in this field, and also make it future-proof, but also conducive to technological progress and innovation. And so 2 weeks ago, on the 17th of May 2024, the Framework Convention was adopted. It aims to ensure that the activities within the life cycle of AI are fully consistent with human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. And it formulates fundamental principles and rules with which AI systems must comply. And those principles are human dignity and individual autonomy, equality and non-discrimination, respect for privacy and personal data protection, transparency and oversight, accountability and responsibility, reliability, and finally, safe innovation. And so the convention also sets requirements for states in terms of remedies and procedural rights and safeguards, and creates an obligation to create a risk and impact management framework. And I can talk about this a little later in the Q&A if you want. But most importantly, it does not only address human rights, but also democracy and the rule of law, and it is open to all states that share the same value. And so the Framework Convention is the first step in creating a comprehensive regulatory landscape for AI, which will be complemented by additional sectoral instruments aiming to guide the member states and others in how to create the conditions for a high level of protection of human rights. And of note, and I think of particular interest to you, are also the recently adopted guidelines on the responsible implementation of AI systems in journalism. Now, we talked about the challenges of regulating AI, and I can think of three. The first one, as Kelly said, is that the technology is constantly evolving. In the middle of the negotiations of the treaty came ChatGPT, and this is everything everyone was talking about. And so how did we manage this? Well, we made sure that the text is technology neutral and flexible enough to be future-proof and not obsolete in 6 months, which is a real risk when you have a technology that keeps bringing new products. A second challenge is that when we started working on the text, and very much still true to this day, there's no AI-specific regulation at national level, but there's pre-existing rules in specific sectors, and so we needed to reconcile that. And the solution was that the Framework Convention gives leeways to states to do that as long as the principles are respected. They're at the core of the text principles. And finally, while there's a strong interest in having an international common approach, bringing together a wide range of like-minded states and finding a compromise that's acceptable to all can be challenging because different states have different sensitivities. Here again, the answer was that the treaty integrates all existing universal human rights standards and it makes them effective in the AI context. And so to put it in a nutshell, I believe that regulation is key for the public to regain trust in AI and for the technology to also develop safely and without prejudice to human rights, democracy, and the rule of law. So now we have the Framework Convention, which is a good legal basis and which is balanced and effective. And again, it's open to all states sharing the values of the Council of Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Louise. We did it. So our next speaker will delve into the realm of regulatory actions while shedding light on how digital infrastructure molds political power. With a keen eye on the complicated interplay between media, technology, and policy, he will navigate us through the landscape of platformization and highlight the role of citizen inclusion in shaping our collective digital future. Please join me in welcoming Taylor Owen, the Beaverbrook Chair in Media Ethics and Communications, the founding director of the Center for Media Technology and Democracy, and associate professor in the Max Bell School of Public Policy at McGill University. I'm sorry for that.
Thanks so much. So I have the privilege of leading 3 organizations: the center that was just mentioned at McGill that does media and technology policy, a media ecosystem observatory that tries to better understand the health and character of our media ecosystem, the information that flows through it, and what effect that has on society, and a nonprofit called Paradigms that produces media and podcasts and democratic interventions in the form of deliberative democracy processes in this very discussion. And I have to say, up until pretty recently, none of these organizations did very much on AI. And part of the reason was I was very reluctant to dive into the next technology before we fixed some of the problems of the past one, and before we really understood the impact of the things we were living through now. But I think that's changed for a few reasons, which we're all very aware of. I mean, we have now consumer products, AI products, that have sort of at least shown some value to people and have a promise of future value, and that's created a wide public discourse about these technologies. We have hundreds of billions of dollars flooding into the development of AI, and when that happens, something happens. Like, you can't put hundreds of billions of dollars into developing a technology and it not have an impact. And we have some of the biggest companies in human history betting their futures on this technology. So I think we have to pay attention now to what is going on in a real way. And so that's why I just wanted to maybe offer a few observations on situating the AI conversation and moment that we're in now in a broader conversation about the evolution of our infrastructure and of our media and technology. So the first point I'd make quickly is that the nature of our digital infrastructure has always had a profound effect on the nature of power. And at each phase of the evolution of our digital technologies, power has changed. The first internet, the Web 1.0, empowered individuals and nodes who couldn't speak or didn't have access to the public sphere to speak. This had a real effect on the power of certain actors. Our social media infrastructure connected those nodes together and allowed for collective action. So all of a sudden, not just individuals, but groups became more powerful, groups that were excluded from traditional power structures. The platform internet, or Web 3.0, reconcentrated a lot of that power back into the hands of a few. The companies that filter our experience online, that decide what is seen, who is heard, they have reconcentrated economic and political power in them. And I think the question we need to be asking about this next phase of digital infrastructure of AI is how will that shift power balances again? Because it is certain to. The second point I would make is that we used to be able to treat discussions about the media and discussion about technology as different things, and we did that for many, many decades. But that is no longer possible. I think they both are self-reinforcing to one another. They exist in the same framework, and we need to think of them as one and the same. And they are both heavily influenced by policy. Public policy matters in a deep way to the nature of both our media ecosystems and our technology infrastructure. Even if we do nothing, that is a policy choice that shapes the future of both of those systems. And we need to be really clear-eyed from a policy perspective of how we're engaging with AI, with the companies, with the people building it, with the technologies and how they're used, because it will shape the future of what AI is or isn't. The third point is that, like, looking at these advances over the last year or two, I mean, it's almost certainly the case that certain AI components of AI will be transformative, and other uses and elements and technologies within the AI sort of bucket are all hype. But it is almost impossible to know which are which right now. And that is a really difficult position to be in. I recently spoke to Douglas Rushkoff, who's a media and technology critic who's been watching how cultures change in response to new technologies versus the hype ones versus the unhyped ones for 30 years. And I asked him that, like, how do you know when you look at a system as it emerges, right? Because he's seen the advent of all these new technologies. Which ones are hype and which ones aren't? Which ones to care about and pay attention to and take seriously, and which ones not to? And he said that all he does is look for the ones that are stimulating activity and involving people that he would want to be a part of, that he thinks are interesting and dynamic and generative, not the ones that are taking and diminishing. And I think that's what we need to do with AI. We need to look at where the places and people are that are doing things that we think are generative to the things we care about. Okay, a couple more points. The fourth is that looking at journalism, and I know there's been a lot of conversation about journalism here, I think we need to be really clear-eyed about how journalism organizations and publishers enter into relationships with AI. We've been here before. When social media, when audience and money and content moved into social media, the platform companies at the time, Meta, Google, approached publishers and offered them a bargain. Come to us, we will give you tools, we will give you revenue, and we will give you access to new audiences. And I would say all three of those turned out to be false bargains. The audiences turned out to be fleeting because they were subject to algorithmic change. You never knew where you were going to find them or how you were going to find them. The money dried up. The deals that were between platforms and publishers went away. The revenue model just didn't work, as we all know, for the industry of journalism. And the tools changed on a daily basis without any notice. If that's the precedent of these relationships, I think we need to think clearly about entering into them with a new generation of tech companies like we're seeing now. And it seems pretty clear that publishers have two choices. At a high level, I mean, surely they can experiment with these tools, as they should be, and there'll be lots of use cases that are beneficial to journalism. But at a structural level, they need to decide, are they going to enter into deals that essentially indemnify AI companies from the scraping of their previous data? Or are they going to object and, in the case of the New York Times, sue? And I think there's just two paths there. And it's going to be very interesting to see how different publishers do this, particularly publishers that don't have the clout for the really big deals. We're not all News Corp. We're not all going to get $250 million from OpenAI. The fifth thing is their observation here, and this goes back to the policy side of this that we just heard about too, is that there's a very convenient implication to the two main policy arguments about the future of AI at the moment. Either it poses this existential risk that threatens the future of humanity, or it's a panacea for every social, economic, and political ill that we face as a society. Both of those obfuscate the real regulatory and policy things we can do now, and I think should be doing now. And they conveniently do this. They make it seem like the policy challenge is far in the future. It engages with a technology and a set of potential harms and benefits that are yet to be known, and ignores the things we probably should be already doing. And I would say that we need to think very clearly about copyright policy and how it applies, or whether it applies to this new world. We need to think about data privacy laws and actually having them in countries that don't have any, like here. We need to be looking to competition policy to think about whether we want 4 to 5 companies controlling what they claim is the key technological infrastructure of the next decade, next century, and whether we should be looking for smaller actors. And we need to get the distribution of harmful content right. We know how to do this. We have examples in other countries of online harms regulation that can diminish the harm and the risk of harmful content, whether it's created by AI or not. So these are the things we need to be doing now, not big in my view, big speculative projects about an unforeseen and unknowable future. And the final thing, and I'll just leave it on this, is that we seem to be in a place where we are okay with a very small number of people and companies deciding not just how AI could be built, will be built, is being built, but also whether it should be. And I'm not sure that's how we should allow a new layer of infrastructure to evolve. I think we as citizens need to be a part of this conversation. And I'll leave you with one example of these trade-offs that I don't think these small number of people and companies should be making, but rather we should. So we know that we have an almost certain climate catastrophe on our hands. Like, that is a near certainty. We also know that the potential of AI, of this technology, is simply that. It's potential. We don't know how and whether it's going to be good for society. And yet, we are barreling into this world where we risk that climate future for the energy and natural resources that we're putting into building the AI system, that we don't know how that's going to play out. And I think that kind of trade-off between these big societal risks and decisions needs to involve people, and that really needs to involve new forms of deliberative democracy. So we've been doing a lot of experimentation on citizens' assemblies and how to bring citizens in meaningful ways to designing technologies and regulations that serve their interests. And I think we really need to see a whole host of experiments around the world in that on AI. So I'll leave it at that and look forward to our conversation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Taylor. So as we draw near the conclusion of our keynote series, although we started from trying to predict the future, we're gonna embark on a reality check. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce Jonathan Soma, Knight Chair of Data Journalism at Columbia University, where he directs both the Data Journalism Master of Science and the Summer Intensive Lead Program. With passion and practicality, he will guide us through an exploration of AI, what it currently truly is and what it isn't, setting realistic expectations and dispelling unfounded fears, probably. Welcome to the stage.
Hello. All right, we have to practice audience participation. Are we excited about AI? The answer is yes. Yes. All right, wonderful. Perfect. So right now, in the world of AI comes down to us from on high. It is an amazing godlike power that has somehow come to us and blessed us with terrible fears or wonderful hopes. And what does it all mean? What is going on when we're dealing with AI? And it turns out that AI means a lot of things. And when we talk about AI, we can't just say AI, because let's say we go to book a flight. When we book a flight, there are probably a half dozen different touch points where we're actually interacting with AI systems without even knowing it. So we might visit the page of maybe Skyscanner or Google Flights, and we might see an advertisement, which is targeted to us by AI. We might start to type in our target location of where we're trying to fly to, and our keyboard might autocomplete Athens, Athena. That is also populated by AI. When we hit that submit button and it says, here's the flight that we're looking for, all of the pricing details, all of the layover details, all of that is also computed by AI. Google Flights is very convenient because it says, maybe if you kick the flight a couple weeks in the future, it might be a little bit cheaper, or prices are going to go up or prices are going to go down. Again, calculated by AI. And then when it turns out that you bought the wrong flight and you need to get a refund, you might talk to a chatbot, which is, again, powered by AI. But it's only that last one that we're excited about right now. It's only that generative AI that we are hyped about. The fact that we can have a conversation with a machine. This AI says it is not looking to the past. This is not just about calculations of numbers and finance and things like that. This is about the future. This is about creativity. This is about putting things into the world that have never existed before. For example, I can have ChatGPT write a sonnet about my mean, fat, dumb cat Mulberry. I could have it write a custom curriculum for a child, customized just for the things that they want to do or the things they need to know. I could even have AI sing me a lullaby in order to put me to sleep when I am up late at night, terrified about what the future might bring in terms of artificial intelligence. Are we doomed? I don't know. Just sing me a song. I will be okay. AI, or so we've been told, is magic. But it turns out that maybe this isn't true. Maybe it's not true. Maybe that really boring thing that Google does where it says flight prices are going to go up or flight prices are going to go down is remarkably similar to getting a poem about my cat Mulberry. You would never be told this by an AI company. They would say, this is new, this is fantastic, this is incredible. But it's actually based on the same thing, and that is patterns. It is based on patterns. It is based on looking at what has happened before and projecting it into the future. And sometimes, traditionally, that's been done with numbers. It's been done with pricing. It's been done with anything involving math. But now it has moved forward to text and art and creativity. So we're going to do an example. If I say I'm blank and I ask you to complete this sentence for me, you will say, I have no idea what you're looking for. Sleepy, hungry, Soma. It's a mystery. It could be anything. But I say, okay, let's try this again. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I was hoping for starving. Usually when I do this, usually the first time everyone says starving even though it's hungry, but that's fine. That's fine, close enough. Same general vibe. We're gonna try this again and maybe we'll do a better job this time. Maybe I'll do a better job this time. Dearest friend, I dare say I have not partaken of food in ages. I'm positively famished. Yes, famished. Unbelievable how all of you got that. This is incredible. You all are geniuses. This is the same thing that ChatGPT is doing. If you go to the OpenAI website, there is something called the playground, and you can kind of see into what is happening with all of these AI tools. And in the same way that what you did was you looked at all of the text, the words that came before, and then you predicted the next word, that's the exact same thing that ChatGPT is doing. But instead of just predicting one word, it predicts one word, and then another word, and those words become sentences, becomes paragraphs, become book-length novels, whatever you need them to be. But all it's doing is one by one predicting word after word after word. And you can actually look inside and you can say, if I say I'm positively, there is a 93% chance that the next thing that's going to come out of there is famished. And then after that sentence finishes, I'm positively famished, what comes next? Maybe it's would, maybe it's might, both in the mid 20%. Because who knows what comes after that sentence? Now, when you have a conversation with ChatGPT, it's not always the same. It's not always going to say it's famished. And that's due to this thing called temperature. Temperature allows the AI tool to go further down in that probability list. It doesn't always predict the most likely thing. If you up temperature and up temperature and up temperature, suddenly I'm no longer famished. I can be ravenous instead. We saw famished, 93% chance, but there is that 4% chance that I could be ravenous instead. So if anyone said ravenous, you would have been okay. You would have been okay. Not as popular as famished, but you would have been okay. If we up that temperature even more, sometimes the AI starts to make sense and sometimes it just spouts nonsense. And this is very, very important because suddenly what we're seeing from these tools doesn't look like intelligence. It looks like nonsense that sometimes might work out. And so what you need to know is large language models, like these chatbots, do not understand facts. They do not understand concepts. All they understand is statistical probability. It is just a game where they are predicting the next word and predicting the next word and predicting the next word, and sometimes it seems to make sense. So even something like this sonnet about mulberry, it does not understand cats. It does not understand sonnets. All it knows is that it read a ton of books, it read a ton of Reddit posts, a ton of stuff on the internet. It applies a little bit of statistical magic, and then somehow, out of the other side, you get a sonnet about my dumb cat. As a result of this, when we think about all of the problems that come with chatbots, things like hallucinations, things like me having a master's degree from the University of Denver, things like you can put glue onto a pizza in order to make the cheese stick better, or you have a pixelated photo of Barack Obama and somehow he becomes a white man. These things are not true, but they might just be statistically probable. Statistical probability is all these tools are doing. So it is actually a crazy accident that anything that they do is actually seems to be based in reality. Sometimes statistical probability lines up with truth, not always. So when it does something right, we should be shocked. The default state of things is these tools getting things wrong. So for example, CNET published 71 personal finance articles, and 77 personal finance articles, 41 of them had incredibly long retractions on them because they were written by AI. Air Canada had a chatbot that told someone, yes, you can get a cheaper bereavement fare. It's because you're flying for a funeral. It's going to be great. And then Air Canada said, oh, actually, that's not true at all. And someone had to sue in order to get, I believe, $280 from them. And most recently, New York City had a chatbot which told people that they could steal money from their employees and deny Section 8 tenants living in their buildings, things that were completely illegal, but it was cast as legal advice from a New York City chatbot. So all of these errors are what we should expect from these machines, not accuracy. But everyone is so excited to do it. They say, I can cut some costs, I can do things a little bit more cheaply. This is great, sign me up. But it is a given, hallucinations, bias, low quality content. This is always what's going to happen with these tools. But it's not, doesn't mean we can never use it. Doesn't mean we can never use it. I believe there's a category of things called error resilient tasks. And error resilient tasks are ones where it's fine if things go wrong. For example, poem about mulberry. This calls mulberry a girl, her throne. Mulberry is a boy, but you know what? If I get low quality output, I can say that's fine. I'll just change the her to his, no big deal. I'm editing it. Tight feedback loops. If I ask ChatGPT to write code for me, if I run the code and I get an error, I know it was wrong, and then I fix it. And finally, if errors are expected, what I like to call intern work. Am I going to read 20,000 pieces of legislation at the state level for New York State? Probably not. I would, if I'm looking for gun control legislation, I could read them all and score them all 100% accuracy and filter out the gun control legislation. If I had an intern, they might be wrong 3% of the time, 5% of the time, 10% of the time, but it's fine. I'll have AI do it. It'll be as bad as an intern. No harm done. I'll get what I'm looking for. So I would like to say that fact-based enterprises like legal advice or journalism or construction or sometimes customer service, things that are based on truth are immune to AI because AI doesn't understand truth, doesn't understand concepts. It's all statistical probability. Although we've heard a lot of talk about MBAs, they try to push it into these fields that should be immune, but unfortunately are not. Earlier this week, the Washington Post has AI summaries that are available on articles, which would be terrifying, except for the fact that all of these summaries are now generated by AI, but then reviewed by editors. Why are the editors not just writing them in the first place? Don't really know. So when Elon Musk says something like, mark my words, AI is far more dangerous than nuclear weapons, what is happening here is it is a hype machine. It is feeding into the hype cycle of these tools are so powerful, give me more power so that I can cope with them because I'm the only one who can do it. But in reality, what is happening, the issue is automated systems. The issue is not about the power of AI. The issue is human beings giving up power to automated systems for things like auditing for welfare fraud or analyzing resumes or dropping bombs. This are tasks that we should be relying on human beings to do, but human beings are passing it off to these AI tools or these ML tools or some sort of automated system that is far more simple and saying, not my responsibility, I'm going to let the computer handle it. And this is when we have problems. It's a result of the people, not of the AI. So next time you start to think or start to get pitched that AI is a magic tool, just think about how it doesn't have a knowledge of truth or a knowledge of knowledge or any understanding at all. It is not magic. It is just statistical probability. It is simply patterns, no magic involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And you were on time. How did you do that? No. You're not going off stage. Come on. I was about to ask you if you were an AI thing and you were on time, but then you went off stage. So I realized you're a human. So please, I would like to call them all on stage, and we're gonna have our Q&A session a little bit shorter than initially planned, but we will be fine. We will be fine. So are there any questions on AI aspects discussed today with our speakers? Sure.
Thank you all. These were very insightful keynotes. I just wanted to ask about LLMs and how there's much talk about them being black boxes, having almost zero interpretability. So in that sense, they cannot be reproducible. How can we ensure that there's greater transparency in what's going on inside, like the model weights, the data sets, the logic of the system, so that they can be democratized, essentially? Thank you.
Who is taking this?
So as a person who's very deep in the technology of this, I feel like one of the virtues of journalists is journalists are constantly dealing with things that they do not understand and asking questions to, despite not understanding the inner workings of how they work, you can understand the outputs. And despite the fact that I teach technology and I teach coding and I teach all of these things, I think that the idea of interpretability, a lot of times, we could focus instead on, let's push a bunch of inputs in, see what comes out, and then we're able to find out about things like bias. We're able to find out things like hallucinations. We're able to think about how these tools are used and the goals of them, the systems they are used inside of, and think about their impact on the real world instead of focusing so much on the kind of theoretic peering inside. Now, peering inside is wonderful and delightful, and you can learn a lot about them. But I feel like by opening up even just the weights, even if not the training data, you are able to audit these systems, absolutely.
Can I tell you, there's a bit of risk in going too far down the transparency route on this, I think. And for a long time, we heard a lot from the regulatory side about algorithmic transparency. And I'm just not sure how useful that's going to be when we're talking about LLMs or other AI systems. I mean, I just don't think looking at the code is going to solve the problem. It's going to be things like risk assessments and looking at outcomes and looking at biases of outcome and input. I mean, that's the way we're going to get into it.
I promised I wasn't going to say anything because I talked too long before. I didn't see the time clock over here. But I will add, I'm doing a piece on AI myths and dangerous buzzwords. Algorithmic transparency is a very dangerous buzzword because it implies that you can look at the code once and know something. The fact is these whole programs are designed to rewrite themselves every hour as you feed them more data. So we do have to do exactly what you said. Look at the output, understand whether we can trust it or not.
Yeah. Do we have any other question for our speakers? Yes, please.
Thank you so much to everyone. I agree with you or some of you who said that the coverage of AI technologies in media is dominated by hype and doom. I would like to ask you, what are the stories that you think journalists should be writing, reporting and writing about the impact of AI technologies in societies? What is missing? What are those stories you wish to see?
Who is asking? Who are you asking, Marina?
Whoever
Wants to take it?
answer.
Okay, who wants to take it?
Well, I think that there are some really, really relevant stories on this. I mean, perhaps, yes, it's not that we want algorithmic transparency, but still algorithmic watch, or like being able to report on the results and how these algorithms, again, they have biases, they are reproducing like certain conservative, I mean, in their nature, they are reproducing things, and specifically, they are produced by certain actors. And we do need more eyes on that, and more diverse eyes. I mean, like, for example, there's some amazing work being done by organizations like the Markup, Rest of World, or, I mean, really cool newsrooms. And it's less than in our regions, because, again, it's something that sometimes we don't understand, and we don't get access to the actors that are developing these technologies, and there's a huge gap. But I would like to see more of that, and I think, for example, well, the work you're doing on at Pulitzer Center, and I mean that kind of initiatives, I think they are key, because they are in many ways instilling and creating a lot of the things that we are doing every day. They are inspired about this technology that we don't know a lot of how they are built.
I feel like a lot of the good work that we are seeing comes out of investigative journalism. And oftentimes, science journalism and business journalism, you're doing a lot of repeating what you have been told, either from a paper or a report or a spokesperson. And that usually doesn't have a big impact on the world. But the issue right now is if you were repeating something that Microsoft or OpenAI or Google or one of these other organizations is telling you, either from a technical point of view or a business point of view, you are feeding into the industry in a way which is affecting politics. And so while the investigative side of things is uncovering all of this bias and uncovering, social justice issues, it is really the business, the science reporting that is just doing what they normally do, right? They just, repeat a lot of things that are said because they are not domain name or domain experts often. And it ends up having ramifications in the real world in terms of policy.
I want to know more about how they got all this data. I think journalism should be really tracking back how each of these companies has acquired the type of data they seem to now be using in these models. And I think things like that, like deep getting into the machine and the processes and incentives that have underlaid it are really important for investigative journalism to get their hands on.
Louise, I'm looking at you through our monitor here, and to be honest, I'm not sure if you really want to intervene or not, but I would probably suggest to the production team to keep her unmuted. And yeah, Louise, feel free to intervene if you wish.
Yeah, thank you. I really agree with everything that's just been said. I think on my side, one thing that I would like to see a bit more is the balance. I feel like in the general public, there's a lot of, it's either black and white, like either AI is going to destroy everything and kill us all, or it's great, it's genius, like let's do everything AI. But, for example, we had talks about whether, or we were told rather, well, why don't you ban facial recognition? It's so horrible, it's terrible. Well, yeah, in some cases it is, in the hands of a bad government that's going to use it for bad purposes. Of course, it's a very powerful, terrible tool. But then there's also other examples. For example, we know that facial recognition can be used for patients that have lost the ability to move, and they can, for example, move their face and communicate with the outside world. So, again, this is why also we've taken the stand to not ban any technology specifically, and to say, okay, look at the context of the use of the AI system. So I think one thing that really needs to change is to not have this black and white also vision of either AI is terrible or it's great and it's the best thing since, sliced bread.
Thank you very much. So we would normally need to wrap up because we had a longer beginning than expected. I would ask just to take one question if there is any. Or okay. So no need for any overtime here. So I would like to thank all of our speakers today in this keynote series on AI. Those were Taylor Owen, Jonathan Soma, Mike Nelson, Paula Valacco, and Louise Riondel. Thank you all very much.